Mame fa say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there osia dem yopo.
Mr. Pratt?
There are a number of issues about this NPP Delegates conference which need to be cleared. They haven't been cleared yet. First, there's an issue about the venue. The venue is the University of Ghana. And before the NPP announced that it was going to hold the conference on the campus of the University of Ghana, the university authorities rightly indicated that they were discouraging mass gatherings on the campus as a result of the outbreak of COVID-19. A couple of days before the NPP announcement, the university authorities came back and said that COVID-19 was no longer a threat. It had been dealt with, and that this delegates conference could take place. The issue is this. Yes, there was a COVID-19 outbreak on the campus. I don't doubt the university authorities when they said that it had been dealt with. But the influx of large numbers on the campus could bring about a resurgence. So I'm just wondering why the university authorities decided to take this gamble. What were the influences, what happened, and so on. That's a huge problem. But I'll leave it at that for now. For me, the other issue is simply that from the NPP leadership itself, we are being told that this conference is being organized as a follow-up to the presentation of the Mike Okwe report, which looked at why they performed so abysmally in the last elections, and apparently made recommendations for dealing with those problems. Now, the first time the report was presented, we were all informed by the General Secretary, by the party leadership, that the report was so confidential and was being treated so confidentially that only one copy was available, and that even the author of the report did not have a copy. I mean, since then, flag bearership aspirants of the party, leaders of the party, have publicly called for copies of the document. And as we speak, I'm certain that the document has not been made public, even internally. I'm not talking about making the document public for all of us, but even internally. Key players have not seen the document. So this reform, which is based on a report which is so secret, how successful is it going to be? I just wonder, you understand? Now, one of my key worries is that anytime this issue is raised, the NPP leadership says, oh, but the NDC did the same thing. And it's not just about this. Anytime the NPP leadership is questioned about anything, they then tell us that they are copying what the NDC did. They refer to the Kwesi report and so on. Now, if all they are going to do is to copy the NDC, how are they then an alternative to the NDC? Because every time they do these things and the issue is raised, the answer is that the NDC did the same thing. So if all you're doing is copy, and so on, how do you then become an alternative, to the National Democratic Congress? But that's for them, again, to resolve. Now, as we speak, an injunction has been filed in the High Court trying to stop the Congress from happening. And this injunction apparently was filed by two persons, and I don't know whether it has been served, but if it has been served, then the Congress cannot take place. But we don't know. What we do know, however, is that one of the petitioners, Shamsuddin Idrisu from Wale, has come forward to say that even though his name is on the petition, he hasn't filed any petition. His name, his house number, everything is on the petition. and says he hasn't told any lawyer to file any petition at the High Court. So who in the New Patriotic Party decided to file this petition and use fictitious names and addresses to file the petition? It's a huge matter. You understand? And I'm hoping that this matter would also be resolved, because it does raise substantial issues about the party and some of its leaders and some of the lawyers purporting to be acting on behalf of party members. If what Idrisu is saying is true, it does raise these substantive questions. Basana, prominent members of the party have not ceased complaining. There are delegates to this conference who say that they haven't even seen the agenda. As of this morning, they are complaining that the amendments which are supposed to be discussed and approved or rejected have not been circulated. Is this a case of just general sloppiness? Or is it a case of a deliberate attempt to push everybody into a bind in that party? I don't know. But this morning, one of the complaints has come to my attention, and it's extremely interesting. This is a write-up which was prepared by Dr. Atta Kobna Kennedy, a founding member of the New Patriotic Party. And this makes interesting reading. Indeed, if you permit me, I'll read all of it. If you don't, I'll read extracts. But whatever it is, this document is a most interesting document prepared by a founding member of the New Patriotic Party. Not just a founding member, one who also was the campaign manager of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo when he made his first attempt to contest for the presidential candidature of the party. Now listen. He says, tomorrow, that is today, he wrote it yesterday. Tomorrow, the cherished New Patriotic Party will take another step on its way to irrelevance, unless it is saved by the delegates. This is a very strong statement. That this conference is a step towards irrelevance. And he continues. A delegates conference should be preceded by constituency and regional conferences, but there were none. Proposed amendments in their final form should be circulated in advance to enable constituencies to instruct their delegates, but this has not happened. Our journey here began when we handed over our party to one man and permitted him to do as he pleased. He took our mandate and delivered to Ghana a government centered largely on corruption, nepotism, and arrogance. These acts of corruption, not seen since the Kalabure era, were rightly described by John Salisbury in Polycratus in the 12th century as acts done publicly, and neither governors nor proconsuls checked them, because the raven rejoices in the works of the wolf, and the unjust judge applauds the minister of injustice. In lands whose princes are infidels and companions of thieves, they hasten to embrace those whose misdeeds they observe, thus adding their own share of iniquity in the hope that they may gain for themselves some portion of the spoil. Wow. As a result of this governance, the people of Ghana overwhelmingly returned the discredited John Mahama to the presidency with 20% of his votes coming from good patriotic NPP members. Many more stayed home. The voters took to the heart Nana Akufo-Addo's counsel that they owned their ballots and could do with it whatever they chose. Given this debacle, our task as a party was simple. It was to restore our party to its cherished values, clean its leadership of those whose misgovernance had left the stench of corruption through scheduled elections, and restore it to its status as a natural party of government. Unfortunately, the leaders who need to face accountability from the party grassroots decided they would exercise illegally and immorally the mandate due to the next executives by organizing amendments and flag bearer elections that they have no right to organize. Initially, there was talk that Nana Akufo-Addo, and Jack, that is John Agyekum Kufuor, our two ex-presidents would jointly step up to call out this aberration, but they didn't. There were rumors that our party elders who had held consultations and found the process lacking would call them out, but just as they did, oh, sorry, it's so long. There were rumors, let me go back. There were rumors that our party elders who had held consultations and found the process lacking would call them out. But just as they did, while Nana Akufo-Addo hijacked the party, they have chosen a loud silence. Then there was talk that the declared presidential aspirants would seize this opportunity to demonstrate selflessness and leadership, but they have not. They do not want to offend those who are bent on destroying their party, lest they destroy their ambitions. So tomorrow, our party, like Asantewaa did under Osei Tutu Odikan, will come to our Pratt River and decide whether to cross it or not. Meanwhile, against the background of what we did in the last 8 years, John Mahama's tokenism looks transformative. His promise to finish the crop-farm market seems like the second coming of Christ against the party that saw a market almost completed by John Agyekum Kufuor and chose to blow $58 million on a hole in the ground called the National Cathedral as the ultimate testament to Aban Boni. Meanwhile, some former government officials who should be clearing their names of facing prosecution are lining up for another chance to continue their loot and share governance through the presidency. The NPP should remember that political parties do not have a divine right to immorality. Wow. The CPP, which was once the most vibrant party in Africa, has no seat in parliament. And the ANC no longer commands a majority in South Africa. Now our party, like the Ashantis did, need more Tinubu Akoduas rather than Kwame Tuas. The delegates for this weekend should have one slogan: let us save the NPP for Ghana. Honorable delegates, do not agree to elect a flag bearer in January 2026 when no sensible Ghanaian will select our Black Stars team for the 2026 World Cup, because we need to see which players are in form just before the World Cup. And politics, like soccer, depends on current form. Let's elect polling station, constituency, regional and national officers before electing a flag bearer to lead a strong, renewed party. Let's insist that all who vote in our general elections can vote in our primaries. Let's demonetize our politics. If you, the delegates, do not do what is right, Ghanaians will reject us again. The NPP does not own anybody's vote, but we can earn it. Vote wisely. God bless you. God bless NPP, and God bless Ghana. Atakobna Kennedy, 18th July 2025. I don't have to add anything more.
Today, okay. Thank you very much. There's Prosper Kalenji of Kasua who says, good morning. Please tell the NPP man that they should give us a break. Why are they in a hurry to have a congress this early? They are rushing to do what? So that they will come into power again to loot our public purse. They should give us a break. So the NPP, never again. They are doomed forever. Thank you. Prosper Kalenji sent that from Kaswa. Prosper, thank you. And thank you very much for sending those comments. Mr. Pratt?
Well, the first point I'd like to make is that I don't think that the decision to cancel fuel allowance, for political appointees can be decoupled completely from the decision to increase the energy sector levy by 1 cedi.
Okay.
It cannot be decoupled completely. And to that extent, it can also not be decoupled from the general energy crisis that the country is going through. So, I like to look at all of this, together. Now, I've heard some people from the New Patriotic Party argue vehemently that this is a PR gimmick. And when I listen to them, I just wonder, PR gimmick? Yes, let us admit that it's a PR gimmick. But there are good PR gimmicks and bad PR gimmicks. And as far as I'm concerned, if this were a PR gimmick, it's a very positive PR gimmick. Very positive PR gimmick to the extent that it changes the dynamics of governance in a substantial way. You see, I don't care about how much money we are saving. That's not the issue. I'm looking at the aesthetics of this announcement. Now, over many years, our leaders have always urged us, to use the phrase, to tighten our belts because things are bad and so on. And the population kept seeing the leaders growing fatter and fatter and fatter. And indeed, when the population looked very closely at the pantalon of the leaders, sometimes you found that the leaders had no belt holes at all. They had no belt holes at all. They were not wearing belts, and they kept telling us to tighten our belts. Now you have a leader who says that, yes, we have to tighten our belts, but everybody must tighten his or her belt. That's good PR. That's very, very good. At least we're beginning to see an era in which all of us, if we have to tighten our belts, we'll tighten our belts. And that for me sends a very positive, message, sends a very, very strong, positive message. You see, in this country, public officials have been misbehaving for a very long time. I mean, in the morning, you are going to work, you can't avoid the sirens. All manner of people are using sirens, pushing us off the road. In some instances, they are just sending their children to school and so on. They misbehave. I've been to public functions when some of these ministers and deputy ministers and so on have come, political appointees have come. And for the period that the function is going on, their engines are on. Their engines are on, burning fuel. And when you have to say that, look, when the minister comes, he shouldn't sit in a hot car. The car must be cooled before the minister comes. So they are burning the fuel. The minister is in a room addressing the conference. His driver is sitting outside, burning the fuel. Now that the fuel allowance has been withdrawn, and I've said this earlier, I want to see whether they will continue to burn fuel in that reckless and irresponsible manner. So it is good for me. At least now, one of the standard misbehavior of public officials may be checked. They won't burn fuel by heart, as they used to do and so on. Again, when the price of fuel shoots up and it begins to affect them and so on, I'm wondering how many of them will refuse the government directive to drive smaller cars in town. How many of them will be prepared to buy fuel 4,000, and 6,000 a week and so on. So all of this must be put together. Must be put together. But how did we arrive here? Sana, we arrived here because of a reckless mismanagement of the energy sector. Complete reckless mismanagement of the energy sector. And I'm not talking about NDC, NPP politics. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a deliberate effort, a deliberate decision by the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America and its handlers to destroy the Ghanaian economy. That's what I'm talking about. Of course, it used agents in Ghana who were largely from the New Patriotic Party and so on. But it was a deliberate decision to destroy Ghana, to remove us from the path of building an independent, self-reliant national economy. And that's why we are suffering. You see, more than 50 years ago, the Nkrumah government examined our national situation. It opted for industrialization. It decided to delink the Ghanaian national economy from the colonial metropolis and so on, and came to the conclusion that electric power was essential for the development of Ghana. That the development of electric power, its generation in abundance, was necessary to give meaning to our independence status. So it went to great lengths, to design an energy architecture that was to safeguard, our move to become independent. What did it do? The Akosombo Dam was established. And negotiations took place between Ghana and the then Soviet Union about establishing a nuclear plant to produce electricity. They agreed that the Bui Dam project should commence. And indeed, on February 24, 1966, when the coup took place, Soviet engineers were already on site to construct the Bui Dam. You understand? It looked at what it called the mini hydro project, which was virtually going to dam all the waters that we had in this country to provide electricity and also to become a means of irrigating the lands and so on. So all of this were thought of. It went to great lengths, to identify green energy sources and how to utilize them and so on. Then February 24, 1966 occurred, and the neo-colonial government decided to bring in a British expert to come and advise on our power needs and so on. And this British expert came and wrote a report and said that the Akosombo Dam was more than enough and that we should not expand our generation capacity. So our foolish leaders stopped. They stopped. They stopped. They ended the agreement with the Soviet Union for building the nuclear power plant. The mini hydro projects were never constructed. They abandoned everything. This is why we are suffering today. We are suffering today because of the anti-Nkrumah reckless governments that we had in the past and the decisions they consciously took about our energy sector. You understand? Now, listen, and I've explained this before. If you look at power generation in this country, we have hydro, and hydro is the cheapest for the consumer. Hydro is the cheapest because hydro is between 2 and 3 cents per kilowatt unit. You understand? Which is the cheapest. Now, when you come to thermal, it's between 11 and about 23 cents for the same amount of electricity which is generated and so on. So when you do what they call the mix, the average is what we pay for electricity. Okay. Before, our electricity consumption mainly came from hydro, so it was very cheap. Now, as a result of the recourse to thermal generation, cost of electricity has risen for the average consumer. And industry continues to suffer high cost of production as a result, and so on. Now we need to rethink this whole energy mix and decide for ourselves what we have to do. Fortunately, in the last 2 months, the Mahama administration has sent experts to Russia to go and start discussions about the possibility of resuming the nuclear production of power. So those discussions have already started. Of course, I know that it was President Kufuor who announced it, but now concretely, since coming into office, the Mahama administration has taken steps in order to bring back, that whole idea of nuclear power generation, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, Senator, as we sit here, I cannot understand. There's no way I can understand why we have sat down and every now and then Burkina Faso opens the floodgates of the Bagri Dam. The water comes, inundates our farms, destroys houses, kills people, and so on. I cannot understand. Because there has already been a plan to build a hydro dam at Savulugu, which will prevent this catastrophe from happening. But we haven't done it. You understand? And when you ask why we haven't done it, they say that the power that it will generate will be so small that it will not make economic sense. And I say, to hell with these officials. To hell with these officials. Because that dam, that hydropower project in Savulugu, is not just meant to produce electricity. It is meant to prevent the destruction of houses, the loss of life. It is meant to improve agriculture and so on. So you have to add all of that value to actually come to a conclusion about what value you are producing. But these lazy officials, lazy technocrats, they would not do this very simple analysis. And every now and then, people, especially in the Upper West region, suffer untold hardships as a result of the spillage of the dam. Now, so this is about avoiding natural disaster. It's about improving agriculture, and it's also about improving our power generation capacity. We need to be thinking about that. Now, Senator, I hear our friends from the New Patriotic Party, especially its so-called minority, make so much noise about the introduction of this 1 cedi levy, the increment of the levy on fuel by 1 cedi, in order to support the energy sector. They make so much noise about it. And they say it would add to the hardships of the people. Of course, yes, it will add to the hardships of the people. But whatever percentage, 1%, 0.5%, 2%, whatever, the hardship of the people would multiply anytime you introduce a levy. You understand? So that's a fact. There's no argument about that. But then what is the alternative? What is the alternative? Why has it become necessary to introduce a levy on petroleum products? Why has it become necessary? And I must admit, first of all, that the NDC communication team has been extremely shabby about this measure. They've been completely shabby. Look, and I asked you, Senator, you are sitting here, I asked you whether you knew about this introduction of the levy before it was introduced. And you said you heard it like everybody else. And I said, my goodness, how can that happen? This is Radio Gold, for God's sake. Radio Gold. Always making sacrifices for government, always ready to explain government policy and so on. The key players in Radio Gold heard of this announcement the same way that I heard of it, the same way that Solomon heard of it. There's a crisis, there's a problem. Nobody was prepared. In fact, governments all over the world do what they call flying the kite. So before policies like this are introduced, they fly the kite. So they can gain public reaction and decide how to manage public reaction. In this case, the NDC decided that this was a secret. It was an industrial secret. Nobody knew. The communicators were not told. Nothing. One morning, we all woke up, bang! So sloppiness on the part of the NDC and its communication machinery was partly responsible for the discomfort that this has generated. You understand? And you know what is worse? What is worse? The day the measure was announced, NDC communicators, most of whom were enjoying free petrol, went and sat on radio and television and said that, as for us, we are ready to pay for the levy. I mean, how annoying could they have been? How annoying could they have been? So, as for the communication on this matter, NDC scores 0 or negative. I mean, it was so poorly handled that it cannot be justified. But you see, I asked my friends from the New Patriotic Party, what is the alternative? And they have no alternative. The problem is that we have a power sector debt which is growing, and we are told that now it has reached a level of $3.7 billion. How do you pay it? Because if you don't pay this power sector debt, very soon we will not be able to generate sufficient power to power our industries. Our health services will be in crisis. Education will be in crisis. Everything will be in crisis because of the insufficient generation of power. We need to pay this $3.7 billion debt now. How do we pay for it? Now, one of the problems, and this is also linked to the poor communication, is that initially, everybody thought that this was a new levy which had been imposed. When in fact, it was an old levy which had been charged even when the NPP was in power. And that all that the Muhammad administration was doing was to increase it by 1 city. And yet, we were all left with the impression that this was a new levy. Again, bad communication. But as for bad communication, if we want to talk about it, we'll talk about it forever. You understand? But bad communication. But you have the energy sector debt of 3.7. You have to pay for it. How do you pay for it? Now, interestingly, that energy sector debt appears to be even larger than what the IMF is giving us. So it's a huge problem hanging on the neck of government. Okay. The New Patriotic Party elements, they are minority. Then they come back and say that yes, we don't know how to pay for the debt, or we haven't put out any suggestion about how to pay for the debt and so on. But this energy sector, the increase in the energy sector levy, is not going to be used directly to pay for the $3.7 million debt. It is going to be used to buy fuel, to fuel the plants. And I'm dazed. I'm completely dazed. You know why I'm dazed? I mean, the level of poverty of thinking it's amazing. You have an energy sector debt, huge, it's lying there. You are having to find money to buy fuel to put in your generation plants, in addition to paying the energy sector levy and so on. If you introduce a levy which enables you to buy the fuel, are you not making savings which you can use to retire the debt? This one too, does it need a professor in mathematics to explain this? It doesn't. So whether it is for buying fuel or whatever, it frees resources to enable us to tackle the energy sector debt. But, my brother, this is the most important point for me. You see, unfortunately for Africa, since the America Cabrals, the Sekou Touris, the Kwame Nkrumahs and so on left the scene, we've had too many idiots in power. Too many idiots in power. And that is why we are continuing to suffer unnecessarily. And I'll explain to you. You see, the United Nations organization was clearly established to protect the interests of the empire, the colonizers. At the time the UN was being established, we did not matter. Our interests did not matter. You know, after the Second World War, when they established the UN, its main purpose was to preserve the existing world order in which Britain, Germany, and so on continue to benefit from our labor, and we gain nothing from our labor. That is what it was meant to do. Ask yourself, how come that for a very long time the UN membership did not exceed 50? How come? Just go and check your history. The UN membership did not exceed 50. It did not exceed 50 because many of our countries had been colonized at the time the UN was being established, and we could not get membership of the UN. So the membership of the UN was reserved for empires, the colonial empires. And they designed the UN and all its institutions to serve their interests. The World Bank and the IMF are part of that architecture of protecting the capitalist world, the colonial empire, against us. And our leaders are not sensible enough to realize that they don't even know our history. They cannot understand that. So ask yourself, how come that every now and then we go to IMF, we go to World Bank, and then they give us prescriptions? We follow those prescriptions very, very strictly. We follow everything they tell us. Our debt keeps mounting, our underdevelopment keeps worsening, and so on. How come? There are only two possible outcomes. One is that the officials of the IMF and World Bank are so grossly incompetent that the solutions they offer us don't work. That's one. Or that these are designs to keep us in perpetual slavery. Only two possible outcomes. But our leaders cannot realize that every now and then they are rushing there, and they say they are going to look for policy credibility and all those nonsense and so on. You understand? So, now let me relate that to what we are discussing now. You see, we went to the IMF and the World Bank for solutions to our power crisis. They forgot the advice which was given by British experts that we shouldn't continue to increase our generation capacity. We stop the construction of the Bui Dam and so on, cancel the agreement to the Soviet Union and so on. It didn't feature in their calculations. What they told us was that we should privatize the generation of power. Okay? That is where this idea of independent power producers came from. Independent power producers, the idea came from there. But worse, they said we should avoid state monopoly. So if we come to the distribution of electricity, now we have three agencies responsible for distribution. If it comes to power generation, they've taken even Bui Dam from VRA and created a separate Bui Power Authority and so on. Created the whole mess in our energy architecture. Has that solved the problem? It hasn't. The problem keeps getting worse. These independent power producers, do you know what it means? Sohini. It means Sohini. Oh, I beg you, Sana. I keep doing this all the time, But Sana, I beg you, reflect. Independent power producers. What does it mean? What we are saying simply is that anybody who can bring a generator to Ghana, a generator to produce power, should bring one and leave it in Ghana. You bring a generator. You don't have to be an energy expert. You don't have to understand how power is produced and so on. For as long as you can find a generator, come and put it in Ghana. Then these people have gone out and found generators and put the generators in Ghana. And we have assured them through agreements that the generators they have brought here, they won't buy petrol to fuel it. Can you imagine? They brought generators, so put them here. We, the Ghanaian taxpayer, we are the people buying the fuel to run those generators. And then we signed an agreement with them saying that whether the power you produce is used or is not used, we will pay for it. Even if you don't produce power at all, we will still pay for it. How sensible is this? So people like me, who know nothing about how to produce power and so on, have gone and seen friends and associates and so on, and put generators in Ghana. We are putting the fuel inside, and we are paying them whether they produce or they don't produce. How does this make sense? So people have become multi-millionaires for doing nothing beyond coming to put generators in Ghana. That's all. And this is the advice of your World Bank and your IMF, which we have followed so religiously up till now. We need to change our thinking in the entire energy sector. I'm happy that some things are being done which are positive. I mean, I listened to John Jinapor only a few days ago. I'm happy that some contracts, which are dubious contracts, have been cancelled. It will bring about some savings. I'm happy about the efforts at restructuring the energy sector, except the suggested privatization of the ECG. It doesn't make sense at all. They shouldn't go there. You know, it's senseless. They shouldn't go there. But these measures are being taken, and these measures assure us that at least there will be a certain level of prudence in the management of our power sector and so on. This energy levy, 1 cedi, if it's properly done and so on, would help us to deal with the debt and so on. So something is being done. But these are stopgap measures. We have to go beyond the stopgap measures and begin to think big about energy policy for now, for tomorrow, for the next 50 years, maybe 70 years and 100 years. What kind of energy policy should we pursue which will bring us permanent relief? We haven't reached there yet, and we should reach there as quickly as possible. As for what President Mahama has done, and I'm rounding up, cutting fuel allowance or stopping fuel allowance for appointees and so on, I salute him. What else should he have done? Cut it. If there are more privileges, cut them. If you can't serve because there are no privileges, leave government. Nobody is forcing you to be a minister. Who is being forced to be a minister or deputy minister or chairman of a board or whatever? Nobody is forcing you. So if you don't like the conditions, go. There are people who are ready to make the sacrifices to build our country. Finish. And for me, I mean, one of the things that makes me so happy is the fact that from now on, they won't leave their engines on when they go to public functions. To draw the attention of Solo to the fact that some of the suggestions he's making about our power sector or energy sector have been implemented with disastrous consequences already. The Rawlings administration privatized the collection of revenue and brought in the Electricity Company of France. After 3 years operating in Ghana, the agreement had to be abrogated because it was a useless agreement. Privatization did not solve any problem. We also tried to privatize water supply and brought in Aquavitans Rans of South Africa. It was also a total disaster. So what you're suggesting is not new. It's been tried, it's failed. I wish I could have time to go into this privatization, but we'll do that at another time. With regards to the violence which was exhibited in Ablekuma North and so on, well, I'd like to point out first and foremost that it's not new. Violence in the politics of Ghana dates back to the 1950s, when opponents of Nkrumah decided that if you miss the ball, don't miss the leg, and resorted to all kinds of terrible things. I mean, terrible things. Sometimes you can't even speak about them on live television. The bombing of school children in stadia, the attempt to kill Nkrumah and his mother in Nkrumah's home, you know, all kinds of things. So it has a very long history, and we have to appreciate that. Now, for me, the other thing which is most important is not what has happened in Ablekuma North. I mean, I think that's very small compared to what we expect to happen in the next by-elections. As if you go to social media and you hear the threats that people are making, you see the attempt at reorganizing vigilante groups and so on, I mean, you ought to be worried about the next by-election. And I want to test the current IGP. He should do better than Dampare did in the last 2 by-elections, because Dampare's record in the last 2 by-elections, were excellent. Look at the elections which brought Jechi, back to Parliament. Clean. Nobody could misbehave and so on. because he totally dominated the constituency and so on. And I want to hope that Mr. Yohonu will do his best to ensure that no limb is broken in the next by-election. I mean, this will be a test of his office. He has to justify President Mahama removing Dan Pare and putting him there. And this is one of the justifications he has to provide. You know, we don't want to hear about violence in the next by-elections. And the IGP has a lot of work to do. Finish.
Thank you.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.